The other major NASA facility now, NBC News veteran space correspondent Jay Barbary standing by at the Cape in Florida. Jay, having covered, what is it, 144 manned missions into space by Americans, what is the talk of the Space Administration this day after a huge tragedy?
Well, the talk here is to hit the ground running and find out what happened with Columbia 39 miles above central Texas yesterday. And with two investigations getting underway, Brian, one internally and one externally, you can put your money on the internal investigation. The people from the contractors and from NASA that put the shuttles into space, they're the ones who will be looking at what happened here, as we see in this illustration coming with the shuttle coming in. We have to remember that the shuttle broke up. The best knowledge that we have right now, as we're seeing here, it broke up at the point in its reentry where the most stresses on the structural part of the shuttle were taking place, as well as the highest heating loads. So anything could have happened up there, and they have to find out exactly what happened. And in fact, at the time, the shuttle was making S-turns or roll turns to dampen out its speed, its energy, so it could hit its landing site here on target. And at that point, if the computers had overcorrected, excuse me, had overcorrected the shuttle in any manner, it could have put it into a tumbling situation. There are so many things, Brian, that could have gone wrong, and when they find out what did go wrong, I'm sure they'll find it in the debris that's being gathered from over Texas and Louisiana. And when they get that done, then the shuttle program can continue.
Jay, since we all watched, what was the 2-year lag time after the Challenger, is it too early for even an estimate by you of how long the shuttle program will be down, so to speak?
Well, what that depends on is, again, Brian, what happened. If it was something isolated to Columbia, then simple fixes can be made on the rest of the shuttle fleet, and they can continue to fly safely. But if it's a major overhaul in all of the shuttles, that would look at 2.5 years, as it was with Challenger before. So they would have to make modifications, as they had to do with the solid rocket motors, and they came up with the J-joint. They would have to do something similar. But we won't know that until they pin down precisely what went wrong. Then they'll know what they have to do.
Now, you'll forgive me for pressing on it. Everyone is so anxious for the latest guess, the latest thinking on the part of NASA before they can get back up into the sky. And then, of course, there is the International Space Station complication. Jay Barbary, thank you from the Cape today. We'll be back with you, of course, throughout the day. And on the space station, by the way, there is an item on the news wires today that the Russians have launched a regularly scheduled rocket that basically is going to the International Space Station to ferry supplies to the 2 Americans and 1 Russian astronaut who continue to orbit the Earth there. As we said at the top of the hour, we are awaiting the very latest on the search of the extensive and sizable debris field that flows from Texas into Louisiana. NBC News correspondent Don Lemon is not far from here in Hemp Hill, Texas, where they expect to be briefed quite shortly. Don?
Yeah, Brian, as you know, these things never start on time, never early, usually always late. We're expecting to hear from Billy Smith, who's the emergency management coordinator here, and also from Sabine County Sheriff Tom Maddox. Now, as you know, most of the debris fell here in East Texas and also west of Louisiana. Here in Sabine County alone, about 100 pieces of debris or more have been found as of about noon today here. About 1,000 pieces found overall throughout Louisiana and also Texas. Most of the counties here that was found in, Anderson, Cherokee, Nacogdoches, Sabine counties, about a 300-mile rather swath that it was found. Also, what we're expecting to hear about in this press conference is possibly the largest piece of evidence that they may have found or may find so far. Some Louisiana fishermen said that they heard out in the Sabine River, out in a reservoir that is actually located in Texas, the Toledo Bend Reservoir, a large chunk of debris, possibly as big as a small car, falling into a shallow section of the water there. The fisherman said he was out fishing. He went over with his global positioning satellite, his GPS, and put the coordinates in, and then when the authorities came out, they detected that something was in the water with sonar. So it appears something is down in that water. There are camera crews out there and rescuers and search crews out there now looking at that debris and trying to recover it from that shallow section of the reservoir there. So that's possibly what we're going to hear about here. Everyone is anxiously awaiting that because that would be the biggest piece of evidence that we would have in this so far. Just to give you an idea, Brian, of how gruesome and how hard this has been for the folks here just falling in their yards, and this sounds really awful, but remains. A hospital employee found, as NBC's Jim Avila told you, a torso, a femur, a thigh bone. 3 children were out yesterday on a four-wheeler in their yard on their farm, and they found a leg intact from the thigh down that was burned, ran into the house and called their dad, and their dad went out, and indeed it was a leg. And also other wreckage and debris found all over this county. So we are waiting on these 2 folks to come out, and as I said, you know, these things always start late. As soon as we get more information, as soon as they get out here, we will fill you in and come back to you.
Okay, again, a reminder to those joining us that there are some very painful aspects to covering this story. It is, after all, about the deaths of 7 souls on board the shuttle yesterday. Don Lemon up in Hempel, and as Don mentions, we'll be going back to the news conference when it is underway. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, Lisa Myers of our investigative unit in Washington on why NASA had been in the news of late before this tragedy.
Imagine a world where automobile painting robots would have absolutely nothing to do because of a revolutionary color-infused, scratch-resistant Lexan plastic that just might make...
He's here in Houston at the Johnson Space Center trying to bring some comfort to the family of Colonel Ilan Ramon, one of those 7 astronauts. When we come back, Ryan Cabell will be joining us. He's up in Racine, Wisconsin, talking to the family of another astronaut who was killed in the Columbia shuttle tragedy. Stay with us.
February 4th on CD, cassette, home video, and DVD.
Save up to 80% by...
We are back from the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. You're looking at the pad, of course, at Canaveral in Florida, one of our other live camera locations as morning turns into afternoon this Sunday across the country with the time zones. And as NASA deals with the crushing realization that 1/4 of its orbiting fleet is gone, and that, of course, 7 of their best and brightest have passed away in this tragedy, NASA was in the news just prior to this disaster for a number of other reasons. This is not the only thing that people will be talking about when NASA's name comes up in Washington in the days and weeks to come. More on that today from the chief NBC News investigative correspondent, Lisa Myers.
A key issue in recent years, the workforce that maintains the 20-year-old shuttle fleet. Investigators at Congress's General Accounting Office warned 2 years ago that NASA's workforce had been cut so significantly it was reducing NASA's ability to safely support the shuttle program. It said there were not enough qualified workers in key areas, and that workers overall showed signs of overwork and fatigue. The new GAO report said though NASA had moved to fix the problem by hiring new workers, the problems have not been mitigated. It warns of critical shortages of qualified engineers in key fields. Keith Cowing, who runs a website that monitors NASA, says investigators must look at whether cutbacks hurt safety.
If you have fewer people attending to safety, there are fewer people attending to safety, fewer things are checked, the backup may not be there, and the greater the chance that something might happen.
NASA's budget has been seriously squeezed for a decade. It was about $15 billion in 1992 and about $15 billion this year, about $4 billion less than needed just to keep up with inflation. The highest priority safety upgrade of the shuttle power system was canceled because of huge cost overruns and technical problems. Still, former Columbia pilot Guy Gardner doubts budget cuts were a factor today.
My observation of NASA over these recent years with the budget cutbacks has been they've maintained safety of the human spaceflight program is their #1 priority.
Liftoff of the Space Shuttle Columbia.
One certain area of scrutiny for investigators, the age of the shuttle and possible metal fatigue. Columbia was 22 years old, oldest in the fleet.
Any program where you're dealing with aging equipment, particularly if you're putting it under the stresses that the space shuttle goes under, aging is a concern.
Investigators also may want to talk to the former head of NASA's Safety Advisory Panel. Just last year, he told Congress he's, quote, never been as concerned for space shuttle safety.
In a moment, after a break, we will examine the future of the shuttle program with a former shuttle astronaut right after this.